Welcome back, everybody. Hope you're all enjoying the offerings that we've had today. I know I certainly am, especially some of the previous ones. They've been so interesting. Joining me now, we've got Jen and Chris from, is it Midwest Games? Yep. And they're going to be talking about the state of publishing at the moment. So over to you guys.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom. Welcome, everybody. Excited to chat with you today about publishing. Really appreciate you attending our session and all the other ones planned today. As Tom said, we are going to talk about the problem with games publishing, starting with an intro on what's going on today and where we as Midwest Games see some room for improvement. So for some quick introductions, Midwest Games, we provide publishing services to games of all type across PC, console, mobile, all genres. We are a newer company. We're proud to be in our second year. And we're led by Ben Qualo, who has a great background at 2K, Blizzard, and also helped start up Netflix games. I'm Jen Corbett. I oversee our marketing here. My background is largely in entertainment and media, working on global anime fandom, science content with Discovery, and very excited now to be focused on games.
And I'm Chris Klemecki. I'm a longtime producer, been part of the games industry on the production side for over 30 years now. Been on both sides of the developer-publisher fence, and indie, AAA, mobile casual, a lot of different companies, only a couple highlighted here, but it's been quite a ride, and really excited to talk about the state of indie games publishing at this point. So why don't we jump into it, Jen? Yeah, here we go. So the intro to publishing. I'll give you a little bit of history here. I think, when we talk about the problem with publishing, well, there are a lot of problems. There's a lot of sub problems, if you will. And one is we're not all on the same page as to what publishing even means, what's involved. Part of that is just the, I think, natural evolution and growth that we've seen in the games business over the 40, 50 years it's been in existence. Certainly the exponential growth of the indie space the last 10 to 15 years has shifted, right, what people's perceptions of publishing could be. And in that history, I think it's funny that we even call it publishing, right? It sort of harkens back to original like book publishing, where an author might hand a book to someone who's or a team who's experts at printing and distributing the content, right? And that's sort of the beginning and the end of the relationship. And sometimes those publishers, as they grew, they pay authors up front, right? There'd be some advance, but that was largely the relationship, and maybe would get into some editing here and there, right? And that has grown over the years. But using that same or sort of building off that model, you had the film industry and you had the music industry, right? Films had studios, and the recording industry had labels, right? And got more into those relationships of like portfolio management and artist development, and really that deep relationship. Not always good relationships, right? Heard plenty of horror stories, but also just that developing industry that spawned, indie studios and indie labels and such. And we've sort of come back to this word publishing, and video games, when I think, our model is closer to that film or music industry model, where there should be a close relationship, a real partnership in the product development all the way through market. So why don't you go ahead with the next slide here? So I think part of this is getting on the same page. Like, where are we with where we have developed as a publishing ecosystem, right? And this is just a small sample, tiny sample of the groups out there, but just to give you examples. So again, we're on the same page with the terminology, right? You've got the first parties, the folks who are, really running the platforms. I would include, Valve in here as well, similar kind of state. But, those big groups that have their own internal studios, their own owned properties, and they manage those onto mostly their own platforms. All the third parties, right? Publishers who are in the AAA space. We can sort of divide the third parties into many groups, but here just giving a few examples. The AAA space, where they go to any platform, invest in their own internal studios as well as third parties, and just sort of run the gamut of content out to large audiences worldwide. And then you've got the indie space, which is kind of Wild West. It's all over the place with small, medium, large. You got folks who really focus on very specific genres, maybe specific models, maybe specific capabilities. And it's a confusing space because not everyone defines publishing or what it means to have a publishing partnership. They define that differently, even between publishers, right? It's not just from an outside perspective. Publishers bring different things to the table. So go ahead with the next one, Jen. So I come at this really, I've been lucky, I suppose, to have many developer publisher relationships, again, on both sides of that fence, and seen, the good, the bad, and the ugly of what that looks like. And so I think, I come at least what I'd like to see in an ideal relationship, what a publisher brings to the table is a whole set of capabilities that can not only help in the quality of the game and the quality of life during development of the game, but also see that all the way through to launch, to success, post-launch, promotion, etc. So you can see here sort of a list of high level, and we'll dive in more deeply. But the bottom line is you get these capabilities in exchange for, again, similar to what you would see in the film or music industry, right? You have a revenue that you have to give up or have as part of the partnership, as well as the property, right? That becomes part of the publisher's portfolio of ownership, is the IP. Oftentimes as an advance against your own revenue, right? Recoup is a big thing. And again, similar to film and music, you see that in the video game industry as well. Something to just be aware of. Some publishers will even do 100% recoup, meaning until they get their money back that they have spent on the title, you won't see a dime. So that can really cause difficulties for studios. I've been in that situation where we don't see anything for months after launch, which can be really painful. And other publishers will do different deals. We've done 70-30 in the past, just so that we're not, it's not our intent to starve out developers in those kind of traditional deals. But you definitely, we'll hear stories of those kind of things still happening, and it can be really difficult. So that's what you give up in exchange for this support and partnership throughout the development process and through launch, and all the time and money spent on marketing and support throughout. Go ahead, Jen. Thank you. So we see the capabilities as largely being in called 3 big buckets, and then there's one sort of a fourth sub bucket I'll go into as well. But let's start with the main 3. I start with business strategy, because this tends to be at the front end of the process. it happens throughout, but some people come to us saying, hey, really need the biz strategy at the beginning. Often call it biz dev, right? A lot of deals being done. Sometimes has to do with funding, licensing, distribution, how the business of this game, of your game, is going to function, and what partnerships are going to be needed, wanted, right? What can you do that would boost not only the quality of the game itself, maybe the time, maybe the platforms. Like there's a 1,000 different deals that can be done to boost how how to elevate your chances of success with the game at all, right? And each of these pieces, you sort of add a little notch to how successful the game can be, and just sometimes it's mitigating risk, right? Different platforms definitely mitigate risk, give you a little boost where it may not even be seen in some charts, but adds to your possibilities and to your revenue stream that would help you make some money off of your product. So all the biz strategy, biz dev is this big bucket of capabilities and work that happens often behind the scenes, right? You don't necessarily even know it, especially when it's not successful. It takes a lot of talking, a lot of meetings, a lot of negotiation to get these deals done, and they often don't work out. So it can be a bit of an invisible part of the business of the publishing capabilities and approach, but it can also be very lucrative. It can be very powerful in how it helps, the more front stage goings on with the game and how it's seen in the public eye. Go ahead, Jen. Thank you. Production. This is sort of my bucket that I tend to focus on, and this is all things related to making the game and making it as good as it can be, and making it as really available as it can be, right, on platforms and release management, getting feedback from users, play testing, quality assurance, the QA testing, getting in as many regions as makes sense, right? All the production work having to do with localization, etc. And then, of course, I've been a producer all my life, so I think of production planning as something that sort of comes with the package. It's something that, when I have been on the developer side, I've always appreciated, my counterparts in publishing who act as, production consultants, review milestones, review the production planning, scheduling, budget, deliverables, making sure that scope versus capacity makes sense, right? And that the math is actually adding up. Having just a third party, a neutral third party to look at your, assessment and your plans and go, is this reality, right? Or does this make sense? Just asking the questions that will help you refine, prioritize, etc., can make all the difference in it being a smooth production that's on time and hits the targets you want, or not. Right? There are plenty of stories of delays and quality problems, etc. I sort of feel like the earlier you can get in on good production practices and good production support, the more chance you have for a successful launch, demo, playtest, etc., and a high quality game getting out the door to as many regions as makes sense for what you're doing. Go ahead, Jen. Jen, do you want to take this slide and talk about marketing a little bit? I could bounce through it, but I think hearing from the expert was good here.
Yeah, I think marketing is an area that actually most people are probably pretty familiar with, some of the channels and tactics there, but broadly, it's really defining your audience, finding them, engaging them, and ultimately getting them to buy the game and stick with the game, hopefully even recommending it to others. There's a lot within marketing, and maybe not every game leans into all of these tactics. They may pick social media more so than events or paid media. Certainly it depends on the type of game, the audience, the timeline, largely on the budget and the resources you have. But these are all the different levers that we look at, mainly for titles that we work with at Midwest Games.
Cool. Thank you, Jen. And then this is sort of the fourth sub bucket. A lot of this falls under the production, umbrella, if you will. But it often has to do with partnerships, right? These are areas where, as a publisher, we would be coordinating different partners and looking for areas where we can support the game via partnerships in all these different areas. And some of it has to do with, very, very deep down in the code, right? Some of it is art, cinematics, right? Porting can be very separate. It doesn't have to be, deep into the development process, but often is, especially if you're doing a simultaneous release, something like that. So, all of these publisher doesn't necessarily have internally, but, in a lot of ways, going back to that biz dev bucket, the partnerships and relationships that a publisher can bring you, even just in terms of options and management of those partnerships, can be extremely valuable when you need it, especially for small development teams. Often need this extra level of support and partnership in order to, especially hit timelines or make the quality bar that they want to in the time that's designated. So really valuable subset, but mostly an external management and connection capability from the publisher. Okay, go ahead. So in the end, right, you sort of look at all those capabilities and you go, well, do I really need a publisher? And there's a there's a bit of self-evidence to that in terms of the examples out there that have succeeded without a publisher. It's questionable. Okay, they probably did some of those capabilities themselves, and to some extent, you need to sort of have a checklist of like, can I do this myself? Yes, no. Okay, do I really want that? Do I need that? Right? How much of a boost? Again, like the more you can check off, the more chance you sort of raise your chance of success. So what can you live with? What's your budget allow for? All of those questions will go into answering, do I really need a publisher? So no, you don't. There's plenty of games out there that don't have a publisher. Jen will get into sort of the problems with that, but it certainly can be done, right? It is a tough road, and it is a road that is in the statistics sense, has a low chance of succeeding, but certainly can happen. So I think it's at least imperative that no matter what stage you're in, you really do an analysis of your own capabilities, your team's capabilities, and whether a publishing relationship would make sense and really be a benefit for you. Don't wait. Get on that.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. All right. So we've given you a good foundation on what publishing is and what publishers provide. Now is when we get into the problems as we see it. I think it's important to note that the first year of our business, we started out as a traditional publisher. We were in that indie bucket, as Chris outlined. We publish games in a real partnered capacity, and we still work with those partners today. But it was really at the beginning of this year that we decided to change our model to become a publisher for hire. We are a services provider that anyone can contract for those same capabilities that Chris walked through. And it was really because we were tracking some of these challenges and problems that we saw as discouraging, frustrating, but also unsustainable, that we decided to pivot to that services model. So I think first up is really the big source of a lot of the conflicts is there are more and more games being published every year. It is a flooded marketplace with all different types of products across genres, platforms, monetization models. We are up to like 25,000 games projected this year on Steam alone. I'm sure there's some projection for next year that's even bigger. So more competition makes it harder for those individual games to succeed. The inventory is outpacing the demand at this point. And that's really due to some good things. You know, a lot of the game engines have become more accessible to individuals, hobbyists, first-time game makers. That's great. That breeds a lot of innovation in the space and accessibility. But it does just mean that it is harder to stand out. It is harder to find your players and be one of the games that they buy that year. So of that 25,000, less than 2% of games on Steam have a publisher. So 98% of them are self-publishing, whether that was their expectation from the start or something they had to pivot to. That 2% of games that does have the publisher support, they're making the lion's share of revenue on the platform. So again, it's looking even more challenging for that 98% trying to make that, 20 to 35% of remaining revenue from those biggest titles. What we're seeing is that we're seeing that evidence like with performance on Steam. It's harder for games to reach the milestones on Steam, which is a very algorithmic platform, to even earn some of the full benefits and visibility and discoverability that Steam offers and is one of like the great parts of publishing there. 80% of Steam releases in 2024 made less than $5,000. That's a hard reality, when so much time, resources, hopes and dreams, maybe even your own personal money have been sunk into titles. For many developers, again, if it's a hobby and really the goal was just to get the game out there and done, that might have been their expectations. But for many, this is a really tough pill to swallow, to see so much work and resource go into a disappointing launch. So it's getting harder for games to stand out because of the competition, because of the way that Steam works. And that is exactly what publishing aims to do, right? It aims to get a good product out there and to get noticed and to sell well. Now we're seeing, because a lot of this competition and other economy and industry factors, that fewer groups are investing in games. Funding is down quite a bit since 2022 and really more similar to the levels that we saw before the pandemic, before things really boosted in positive ways. So publishers have less money to dole out. They also are likely being more conservative of the risks they take, of the games they invest in, of the investment level, or some of that balancing of those revenue deals. It's a tough business for them as well. And some of that is, again, due to that saturated market that we looked at. They're changing, a lot of how they source games. With more available, it's taking many developers longer to get publishing deals that they hoped for. Their content's getting more done. And so publishers are kind of able to wait and look and see how your game progresses before investing. There's been a lot of industry study on these black hole games, which are really games released years ago that are still holding a lot of players' attention. So this is, Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, Pal World now, games that 3-4 years later still maybe taking up 50% of player times. So those players are still putting a lot of their gaming energy into titles they bought years ago. They're not buying as much this year. So essentially, you're not just competing with the other titles that released in 2025, you're competing with games that released in 22, 23, 24. With that, there's also marketing fatigue. There's more games being marketed, more budget being spent. As consumers, you're seeing more of this through paid ads or influencers, and naturally it gets less effective. And then global competition. With a lot of that access, we're seeing really high quality games come out in lower cost regions that are maybe less risky for publishers and increase overall global competition. Now, I think we've mostly been speaking from a US perspective, but it can be even harder to get that publishing support based on where you live. Most of the 2,500 publishers are based in the US and in Europe. You can see from this graph, it's overwhelming. US publishers also generate almost half of that revenue on Steam, and publishers everywhere are largely marketing towards a North American audience primarily. That's shifting a bit. But even beyond language barriers, you think of your network based on location, it can be even harder if you're not in the US or in the EU. Japan and China have really strong publishing, but come with some additional barriers in language or content or even governmental control. And then it's worth noting that some regions actually have really good governmental support or tax breaks that are offered to developers. They want to encourage the game industry in their country. And so Germany, Canada, other countries actually have some specific benefits there. Okay, so what's the new publishing criteria based on all these factors? What are publishers expecting to see before they offer deals? And I think this leads to how that funding is decreasing and getting tougher. They're looking to reduce their risk. So if they can get proven IP, whether that's a sequel title, a brand that has some familiarity, or even a licensed property that they may be bringing into gaming, that's a slam dunk. Developer credibility is becoming more of an attribute that they're looking at. They're looking to see, have you shipped titles before? What is your revenue history? What's your track record on making games that succeed? As I mentioned, that late stage completion, I think, is getting pushed more towards done. They're reducing risk by taking a look at, let's just wait and see how your title comes along. Because again, developers may be looking for a publisher for not just 3 months, but 6 months, 9 months, a year. And so publishers do have a bit of an upper hand here. They can wait and see how your game comes along and how the market may shift in that time before they invest. So, a whole polished core loop they're looking for rather than just that initial vertical slice. And then, of course, market traction. Anything that you've put out there, Steam wish list, social community followers, a demo. These were all things that traditionally publishers, but now we're seeing that becoming more of a boon and something that publishers are looking to see. So this is tough. I mean, I look at this and I think, if you've achieved this, even some of it, you're in a really good spot. You're ahead of the game. You're already proving towards maybe meeting sales expectations. So do you really need to give up half of your revenue? Do you need to give away some lifetime IP rights? This is, something that I look at and I'm like, this doesn't quite line up. And that leads, some rise of self-publishing by choice. Again, 98% of developers are self-publishing on Steam. I assume many of them either never had that in their plans or they weren't able to secure that funding. But we are seeing more accomplished developers choose to self-publish based on that confidence and history of success. This graph on the top shows the rise of hit titles that self-publish, and that hit title is defined as selling 3 million in sales in the first year. And you can see below some of the titles that you'll recognize over the past few years that surprisingly have self-published. And people may choose to do that, of course, to protect their full revenue. They may feel that confidence and they want to fully own the upside, once it launches to consumers. It may also be really in the hopes of just retaining full creative control of their project that has their blood, sweat, and tears in it. They really want to make sure that it's presented in the way that they intend it to. Long-term IP ownership, future games, transmedia projects, merchandise. And then as Chris mentioned, there is hopefully more of an exception rather than a rule, but there are certainly horror stories of things that have gone wrong with publishers that I think, carries on this mistrust of some developers with publishers, whether it's presenting the game not in the light intended or not committing the full amount of funding, even dropping the game before launch based on, some more doubt. We've seen a lot of more challenging outcomes like that for developers, especially as funding dips. Okay, so that brings us to the current state. What does all this mean? We looked at the increased competition, higher bar for a game to stand out. That limited access for publishing support now has even less funding. So ultimately, we're looking at games increasingly need that publishing support to succeed, while at the same time, that availability of that support is decreasing even further. So our little emoji icon guy sums it up. It's deeply frustrating and, in our point of view, unsustainable. So Chris, I think, is going to tell us about where that leads us to some current opportunities.
Sure. Thanks, Jen. Yeah, I mean, that just points to, we have a lot of empathy for this current state and for a lot of developers that need help and are having a tough time finding the kind of support that they need. We've seen a ton of it in the past couple of years, and understand that there's a catch-22 there, right? How do I get that traction without that I need to get support before I have the support to get the traction? Like there, and there's a whole lot of complexity in there, and every situation is different. Every publisher is different in how they might approach that, or work out a deal, even in the criteria that Jen was talking about, right? It's some publishers will do a little bit of variation on those themes, and so it's hard to make hard, fast rules, but there are definitely trends, and it is trending towards very difficult. So that's where we sort of come to these opportunities. Go ahead, Jen, with the next slide. Right, there are slight windows of light that I think we can look at, and you can sort of assess what works for you, what possibilities, right? How can you navigate this current difficult terrain, this ecosystem, and give your project the best chance of success possible. Platforms, right? Mobile continues to grow. There's new mobile platforms constantly. I mean, geez, Xbox bringing out a mobile platform. You just had Switch 2. Like there's a whole bunch of mobile new phones all the time, et cetera, et cetera. So that's an area that has been part of that exponential industry growth over the past, call it 20 years even, but especially in the last 10 to 15 has just been tremendous. Seeing more regions be large enough to really have a significant impact on revenue. More regions of the world, more languages. It really, when we were doing our localization assessment, it seemed like the data was hard to even get because it changed. It keeps evolving so fast. It's like, what is the current state of the market, right? Which languages, which regions are moving, and a lot of them are moving really fast. Which is great. It's also been fun to see that on the development side. More developers from different regions having higher level of expertise, as Jen alluded to, right? That's a challenge, and it's also an opportunity, right? It means that those regions have more fans, they have more players, they have more people interested, have more economic capability, right? To buy games and to try different things, right? They don't have some of the historical or those black hole games, right? Some of those aren't as entrenched in some of those areas. People aren't necessarily playing those games from 10 or 15 years ago. They want new stuff, and new populations also means just more different interests, right? Indie games, innovative games have a real opportunity in the global market. Roblox, you could put this into the category of other platforms, but it is its own thing, and it continues to grow. I think expanding your view of what even other platforms means. For example, we've been talking with TV manufacturers, smart TVs, and their capabilities. Those are basically computers in your living room, right? they're big tablets that absolutely have an opportunity for games. And so there's new platforms coming all the time. And again, just sort of expanding your idea of what a platform even means. Roblox has some interesting things as just one. Discord, right? That's a new platform that has a lot of social capabilities built right in. So it's just ripe for social games and games that can fit into that ecosystem. HTML5, so different engine work and different approach. We're seeing some really interesting things there. So again, different platforms, different audiences, different types of audiences, and different approaches can make all the difference for your game. And yeah, this indie space, it's one of the reasons I love it. It's really cool. There's all kinds of new approaches and new ideas coming all the time. So, I think we're not going to see the indie space slowing down anytime soon. That's for sure. And there's a lot of growth in terms of the consumer interest in indie games as people, do graduate out or look for new ideas out of their black hole games. That absolutely occurs on a regular basis. They look for what's new, what's interesting, what's different, and indies have definitely provided that. And the quality of indies has continued to grow as the tools get better and better. So lots of space, lots of interesting things, but you can't always use the same old thinking or same old models. Got to look in new spaces. Go ahead, Jen. And there is still money out there. It's again not traditional. It's not necessarily in the big publishers that you've known or were on that front page, right? You're not necessarily going to get indie investment from Nintendo. example, right? Like that's not going to happen. So yeah, maybe you could argue that was never the case, but just as an example, right? That money is drying up from bigger publishers. So where do you look for investment? Where do you look to get project funding? And there's definitely a number of them listed here. I won't dive deep into each of these, but I would also mention what Jen alluded to earlier with the regional, government funding. We're seeing that be a big part of new studios in different regions, and the growth there. Don't discount that as a possible source unless you're in the U.S. That's unfortunately not great. Seeing a little bit of tax break funding coming in, but in terms of direct investment, there's less of that. But lots of opportunities. Kickstarter is still a thing. It definitely dipped for a little while. I was part of the early wave of big game Kickstarters with Shadowrun Hong Kong and BattleTech. We used to see really big money on Kickstarter. That was great. It worked exactly as we needed, right? It was the kickstart that allowed us to do big things. That lost trust and lost a lot of projects sort of didn't come to fruition. So Kickstarter sort of went to the back of the line in terms of people feeling like that could be a source. But it has really returned. The board games have actually led the way there, and shown that it can be a platform to get you a good investment and community start, right? Don't discount the power of building a community on Kickstarter. People who are more than just financially invested, but as fans and as community want to see the game succeed and tell their friends about it, right? It can be very powerful. So yeah, just some thoughts to sort of think beyond the traditional publisher funding model. Okay, go ahead. And for developers, what does this all mean? As Jen said, more and more looking at self-sufficiency, self-publishing, analysis of those capabilities and trying to make as many of them happen as a backup plan, and just have as many options in place and sort of know what boxes you need to check and look at as many ways to check them as you can. As always, focusing on the quality of your game is still important, right? Again, kind of catch-22. How can I focus on my game if I'm focusing on all these other things that need to happen? And it is tough. It is a tough balancing act. And depending on your team and your team's capabilities, and where you can get that funding, how much funding you can get, you're going to have different options on that. But the quality of your game still matters. It still matters a lot. And getting in early in terms of pitching it, presenting it, giving it as much potential for that support as possible, not waiting too long, certainly not waiting until the end, is going to be critical to get you as good a potential as possible. Having that plan, right? Just a plan for how you might approach it and what those options are and what those capabilities, who's going to do them, who you can partner with. I think even those who self-publish it aren't doing it alone. So, think about partnerships in a wider way of how you can team up with other folks who might just expand your capabilities and offer some value to the table that will help you have success. Go ahead, Jen.
Thanks, Chris. All right, so this leads us to what we've been working on at Midwest Games, and a solution that we thought was especially timely and hopefully making some of what we see publishing as more sustainable. Now, I mentioned we are a services provider. We do all the same things that a traditional publisher may do. We just do it on a for-hire basis. And so that means that instead of, us coming in early and providing an advance or funding up front, we work on a monthly or even hourly contract. And in the end, we don't ask for anything in return. We are just here to support your game. There's no expectation of rev share or IP rights. You stay fully in control of those decisions. So we think there's a huge future of game publishing in this for-hire model. The traditional publishing relationship's not going to go away. There is still a great case and place for that. We just think there's 98% of those other games on Steam alone that don't have this publishing support, and they need it. So that's really how we've built this model. Again, like the three main benefits that we are offering is that ownership. You stay in full control of the profit and decisions. We also aim to be really flexible. This is another area that we've just seen traditional publishing deals be really hard in the modern environment of making games. Developers need flexibility. Their resources change. The market changes, their game changes. And so the flexibility of how we offer support is through how we set up our contracts. We can come in for a really short stint. We can come in usually pretty quickly, or we may work with some partners over many publishing aspects of their game over a long period of time. We also have traditional contracts that can be canceled. It's not something we like to market a lot, but you can't really break up with a publisher easily in the traditional sense. That is a very complicated legal deal that nobody wants to deal with. With us, if things aren't working, if your goals have changed, if your needs have changed, you can wind us up and down really quickly. And so that's one thing that I think we're actually really proud of that we're offering to developers that they just haven't had before. And then the full support, we offer that full range of production, marketing, biz dev and strategy, developer services that Chris walked through. So you can work with one house. You're not working with a public relations firm, a animation artist, a paid media specialist. We really are an extension of your team. So we think that's a benefit, but you can also work with us for a la carte services, just for PR or just for QA or localization. We serve 3 different groups. We think, of course, developers and studios are a prime target and the ones looking primarily for this support. We've also seen that publishers need extra help. They may have periods of intense work and deliveries and opportunities that they need to scale up their services, or there may just be certain expertise they don't have in-house. And then similarly, bigger media companies, ones that are already in games based on successful IP that they own, or ones that want to get into games that just don't have this type of dedicated expertise in-house. Going through, some of the work we've done just to give you a better picture of where we're helping and the range. Chris and I can walk through a few of these case studies. We won't read them in detail, but just to give you a glimpse of what we're doing. We're working with partners in really distinct and different ways, which is super fun. We're really happy to work with DevHouse, which is a studio based in Texas, coming in really early stage, providing some strategic direction on a project they've been working on. And so we were able to give them a lot of market understanding, production expertise, marketing direction, as well as some biz dev partnership and distribution connections to really help them get ahead of the direction of their game when some of those crucial decisions made sense. This was another really fun project with a group in Sweden called Might and Delight. This was on the marketing side. So my team and I, again, to that flexibility, we came in really quickly with this group just to go through getting them ready to participate in Next Fest. So it was a big marketing push across social and video and creators to get them to stand out more to the desired audience ahead of Next Fest. And so we came in really quickly, made a good amount of impact, and hopefully set up that game for really good success down the road. And then Chris, maybe you can speak to this last one.
Yeah, real quickly, because I know we want to get to questions here. This is all about helping a team that was porting from mobile to consoles, in fact. Trying to get that connection, getting all the platforms and release management. If you've ever dealt with like Microsoft's Partner Center for Xbox release, like it's a huge admin task, incredible time sucks. So, taking that off of their hands so they could focus on, making the quality of the game even better, controls, etc. All the mechanics work for the higher end consoles, redoing a lot of the art. So it's beautiful on consoles, etc. This was a really great example of us being able to come in and help on the production side. Did a bunch of localization as well to get it into different regions and just sort of give them the whole, distribution capability while they did the porting work, and we could help them QA, compliance testing, all that, set them up for success in this new space.
All right. Thank you all. We really appreciate you attending the session. Hopefully it was informative and interesting to you all. And I just want to give a big thank you to Tom and Indie Game Business for hosting all of these sessions, doing all the work that goes on behind the scenes, and making all this information and connection possible to so many of us.
No, it's been great having you guys on, to be honest. So we do have a few questions. We'll start with Yannick. He's got a couple. So first up, does Midwest publish games from outside Midwest USA?
We do. And I love this question because I want to make sure it is known that we will work with games everywhere. The name really comes from where we're based mainly. We started out with the mission, and we still have this, to grow access to the industry. And so we primarily were looking at how can we build in the Midwest, the middle of the United States, where so much of the games action is located in more of the coastal areas.
Yeah, and I think it also just speaks to our heart. There's a certain, if you are aware of sort of Midwest nice, and the empathy and the just being treated well is part of our ethos. We try to reflect that in the company as well, but it by no means reflects specific partners that we work with. We have partners all over the world.
Fair enough. So we'll go back to Yannick in a minute. This one from Vaporwave over on YouTube. It feels like the industry is saturated with similar games recently, hero shooters, roguelikes, deck builders. Do you think publishers could help with this by backing titles that aren't chasing trends?
I'll jump in real quick with just if depending on how deep you look, there are games of all genres coming out all the time of all kinds. So yes, there are trends, and yes, publishers do try to help in some cases, but it also speaks to the fact that some genres at some times aren't selling well, and so publishers don't want to take the risk on genres or games that they know have a less chance of a success than others. Doesn't mean you can't have a surprise hit, but that's just the nature of those trends and the investment that goes along with it. And that being said, I see games from all kinds of crazy genres and, mixed genres coming out all the time. So I think depending on how hard you want to look, you can find new innovative ideas as well. But yes, there are investment trends that are reasonable sometimes, and sometimes you go, okay, we're tired of those, and so it evolves.
Yeah, I think what they're asking really is, would publishers ever, take that chance and go away from what's trending to maybe something a little bit out there?
Yes, it does happen, and you'll find some publishers more into that than others, and some publishers are very genre specific, right? There are a number of horror game genre publishers, right? Behavior is one I can think of. There are other indie groups that do horror specifically. The name escapes me at the moment, but point is, is that a trend? Well, that's just what they do, right? So if you want horror, you go to them. That's sort of their whole thesis, is that if you like horror, you go to that publisher, right? So yes, there are publishers who will take a chance, or look at their own specific thesis in a way that might point them to different opportunities, but fewer of them, right? That's the nature of the risk of taking a big chance, is you're just going to find fewer opportunities for that kind of thing.
Yeah, and publishers, the reason they would take that risk to overlook market data and say, we're going to take that risk, is the quality of the game, right? And so it's got to bring something overwhelmingly unique or amazing in the art or the mechanics or maybe the social nature of it. That's what they need to see to say, like, we think we can buck the trend and like get this to reach more people who don't normally play puzzle games or don't normally play platformers. And I think a lot of publishers would love to take all those risks, but it is
at the end of the day, it's capital
business.
that's at risk. And
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I get that.
And for what it's worth, I do love this. I see a lot of publishers online, and they're sharing games that they have been pitched to other publishers, saying like, hey, look at this title. Is anyone interested? It's so good. We couldn't take it on. And so I want to stand up for all those publishers out there. I see, really like loving certain games that they know they just can't do deals with right now.
No, that is good. So we've got another one from YouTube. I think this will probably be the last one due to the time. So this is from Abby. If a project is already in an early access state with a team that worked on it, is it beneficial or reasonable to try and keep that original team together as much as possible?
So early access is a whole other topic and can be really challenging if you've done that on your own, and depending on your level of success with it. That there's a lot of factors that go into how you might interact with a publisher on that, and how a publisher may or may not be interested in working with a title that is already sort of launched, at least in the Steam sense. You have launched, so that provides some extra challenges. But in terms of the original team, I mean, look, developers got to do what you have to do, and that teams evolve based on what team members' needs are, and circumstances change. I don't think it's critical that the original team is a part of moving a game forward. It certainly can be beneficial, but that's not a specific criteria I would necessarily look for. Other things are more important if you're talking about a game in early access, in terms of how you would move forward with the marketing, and how do you get visibility on a title that's already sort of moving forward like that, and in the public eye. There are other challenges more more pressing than specific members of the team.
No, that's fair enough. So yeah, we are running out of time, unfortunately. Those of you with questions that I didn't get a chance to read out, we do have a discussions area in Discord. Not sure, Chris and Jen, are you going to
Yep.
be hanging around for a little bit, maybe?
Yep.
Yeah,
sure
we'll
thing.
be in there. I'll also add Midwest Games has a Discord. We have a channel there called Ask a Publisher. Anyone's welcome to join that and ask us your questions. We really want to give out as much information as we can, based on limited knowledge, but that's a resource too.
Awesome. So yeah, Jen and Chris, thank you ever so much for coming on. It's been great hearing from the publisher side of things, and the business model that you guys have got where it's like work for hire. That I think is phenomenal and groundbreaking in this industry.
Thank
You know,
Thanks, Tom.
it's I mean, you know, it's only my opinion, but yeah, it's absolutely spot on. I think, you know, with the scalability and everything. So thank you both very much for coming on. Up next we have Marius with balancing life to make games, touching on topics such as parenthood. So yeah, that's coming up in a sec, and we'll see you all later.
Thank
Thanks
you.
all.